respective rooms via Zoom. As a reminder to all committee members, as a condition of this meeting, it was important that we could all see each other and hear each other at the same time. And we were all streaming live to the public on YouTube as we speak, as well as over the legislative audio stream. So we want to welcome Director Dan Brennan of Maine State Housing to deliver a presentation to us and then answer some of our questions on housing today. So welcome, Director Brennan. We're really glad to have you here today.
Well, good morning. It's nice to be here. Can you hear me okay? I should check that first.
The audio is terrific.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, Senator Bellows and Representative Sylvester and members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Dan Brennan. I am the Director of the Maine State Housing Authority, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. I thought what I would do is, first of all, give you an overall view of how our agency has been operating in the past few months. And then I would like to go into some specific programs and responses that we have done for COVID-19, give you some details on that, and answer any questions if that's okay with you. So since the middle of March, we have been operating at nearly full capacity. 85% of our staff on average has been telecommuting. We moved to a telecommuting environment over the course of 2 days, which was quite a task for our IT department, but we were able to remain open for business. And with the exception of some programs and activities that involve going into someone's home or business, we have been operating at near full capacity. So I'm so proud of my team and everyone here at Maine Housing that we can do the important work we do during this trying time. As far as our business lines and our production departments, we've been moving on quite well. Our core program, one of our core programs, our single family first home program, and that program has actually increased in strength over the last couple of months. We expected quite a sharp downturn, and we've seen quite the opposite. The pipeline of loans that are being submitted to us by our lending partners around the state has increased dramatically right out of the gate when the pandemic hit. And even working remotely, we've been able to purchase loans that we have. Our production is actually, in the term of volume, up over 16% from a year ago. We have been successful in going Wall Street and
Director Brennan, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 minute. Forgive me. I'm hearing from someone in the public that we cannot hear your sound entirely. On your computer, does it say your internet connection is weak or?
No, I'm not getting any sense of that. I don't see any note.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. That just came in loud and clear. So continue, but I'll
lean a little closer.
Okay. Terrific.
Okay, and please let me know if there are more difficulties.
Will do. Sorry to interrupt.
So our single family program has been going very strong, and we've been able to successfully raise money in the bond market, which is one of the core part of our business. Just this week, we've raised $75 million. And we're going to be able to actually lower our first-time home buyer rate this week. So we're very excited about and pleasantly surprised how we've been doing with that program. At the same time, the expected delinquencies and foreclosures that we've been concerned about have not materialized to our greatest fears. We're anticipating a rough ride as people are going to have trouble making their mortgage payments.
Excuse me, you're still breaking up. I don't know if it's just for those of us that are in separate rooms, but it's very hard to hear you, so I'm not sure what the problem is.
Representative Dorr, I think we'll have someone in IT. You came in loud and clear. Dan, it does seem to be a mic issue, so leaning close to your computer should do the trick.
I'm having the same
Okay.
problem.
I was speaking of our delinquencies. Our delinquency rates have been not as bad as we have feared in comparison to other states. We are financially prepared for an onslaught of delinquencies should that happen. We're ready for it. On our multifamily production side, we are still continuing to work in the construction industry, and some project completions have slowed, but they've not been completely shut down. A few delays here and there, but we're very happy with how our multifamily programs have continued to operate. Demand for the program is remaining high. The state low-income housing tax credit that you'll all remember from January has been going
So
along
Director
quite well.
Brennan, I apologize. Again, we're having problems. I'm going to ask everyone who's not speaking to turn off their video. And Director Brennan, we may have to have you turn off your video. The load may be such right now at this moment that it is influencing the stream from you to us. So, great. Continue, and our apologies for these technical difficulties.
Okay, I have now shut off my video.
Great. And we
Does
can
that
hear you
seem to
loud
have
and
made-
clear. Yep, that is much better, actually. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. The general sense of the message is that our core programs on our lending, our single family and multifamily side are proceeding along better than expected, and we're very happy about that. As you remember, we started off the year with the governor signing the state low-income housing tax credit into law, a monumental step for us, and we have been hard at work with our partners around the state, putting together the structure of how that program will work, and that is moving along right on its pace to be coming out in the fall. So we're very, very excited about that. We have been able to continue to house people who have housing choice vouchers, Section 8 rental assistance, and particularly with people who were impacted with job loss and incomes going down, we were able to process hundreds of recertifications of income, and that basically shifts the tenant portion of the payment down and the government portion of the payment goes up. And so we've been adjusting and adapting, remotely inspecting projects so that people can continue to use their vouchers and find housing. So the heating assistance program, we have extended the deadline to July 15th for that program. And we've modified the program so that people who are impacted can use current income, not their historic income. That will make more people eligible for the heating assistance program. And we've also been working very closely with the Public Advocate's Office. They have received, or they have $5 million that was created out of the sale with Ameri that is dedicated to low-income households. And we're going to help them disperse that money to keep eligible clients, or waiting until the 15th of July to allow as many people as possible to be eligible for a portion of those funds that will help their electric bill in those territories that are served by Ameri. Our weatherization, home repair, and lead programs have been impacted, as you might expect. There's a lot of involvement going into people's homes there, and so those have kind of slowed down quite a bit. We're doing as much as we can remotely. And we've been able to keep many grant programs that we have with communities and aging in place grants to different organizations that do minor repairs in people's homes. We've at least executed the grants and got those monies set. So in summary, in terms of the agency's operations, we haven't lost too much of a step here. Our day-to-day operations continue to remain up and functioning. Again, great work by my staff and the technical people to allow 85% of our staff to operate remotely. And as you might know, today, today is actually the last day that we will be occupying our current headquarters at 353 Water Street. At the end of business today, we'll be closing down for tomorrow and moving over to 26 Edison Drive to our new headquarters. So we've been able to do some wonderful work there and are looking forward to our new home. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and talk about some of the specific COVID-related programs and activities, or any questions. What would be your preference?
I think it would be wonderful if you could move into the COVID-related activities, and then when you've concluded your presentation, we'll go through the committee members and ask you questions. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. So let me start with the rent relief program. This program we stood up in the course of about 1 week, working very closely with Governor Mills herself. Maine Housing put $5 million of our home fund, which we are so grateful for your support and the support of the legislature. An example where Maine Housing can take that money and deploy it very quickly for unexpected needs. We knew right off the bat, with unemployment numbers skyrocketing, that many people were not going to be able to pay their rent, pay their mortgages. Both yourself and Representative Sylvester called over immediately, and we started working on that program. So the program provides a one-time payment of $500 to individuals who have lost their income and been impacted by COVID-19. It's being delivered through our agency, our Community Action Agency network. It's a very simple program. It's very, there's no third-party verification. Everything is done on an attestation of the household. It's online on our website at mainehousing.org. To date, over 11,000 people have sent in an application. We've got 8,400 of those that have gone out to the community action agencies. Some that come in are duplicates, and that explains a lot of that difference. The CAP agencies have approved over 5,600 of these applications, and nearly $2.1 million has already been paid out. So we're proud of how quickly we were able to get some relief out there to people, and we're continuing to work to make that program as effective as possible. Today, we'll be announcing the extension of that program for the month of June. So individuals who need help paying either back rent for April or May, or maybe for June, will receive a one-time payment. And as we do that, we are also working with the Department of Economic and Community Development. They have some federal funds that will be able to deploy in July, and that will continue a rent relief program. It will be modified a little bit due to the federal requirements that are associated with that money. But we're working with Commissioner Johnson and her staff to put that program together. So the goal here is to have a rent relief program of some sort available through the summer and as we head into the fall. And big picture, we're looking at potentially the HEROES Act or other federal money coming from Congress. But we've been happy to be able to do that. We've also stood up a very similar program for projects we finance ourselves with that. So that's what's going on with regard to rental relief. The next major area that we've been focusing on with COVID has been about our homeless shelters. If this crisis has taught us anything, it's that our network of shelters around the state are not equipped for a pandemic. Buildings that congregate large numbers of people together is not the setting you want in this pandemic. And we've got a number of ideas and thoughts that are leading us to that we just simply can't go back to the way things were. The the first thing we did is recognize that we needed to find other locations for people in homeless shelters to be apart, socially distanced properly. And so working with the University of Maine system, and I believe someone from that system will be speaking to you as well, I can't say enough about the university. They heroically stepped in and offered 3 locations in the state, 2 of which we were successful in standing up what we called a wellness shelter. We did one in Portland at the Sullivan Gym, and we did one in Presque Isle with the University of Maine at Presque Isle. And that allowed the shelters in those particular areas to simply distance healthy people in a setting that would prevent the rapid spread. Now, there were unfortunately some outbreaks that we know, but we were so much better prepared with these wellness shelters than we would have been otherwise. In addition to the wellness shelters, we also contracted around the state for hotel rooms, for quarantine and isolation when people were either exposed or became sick. And we did that in several areas, 5 locations around the state, and those are still up today because, as you know, these outbreaks can happen in a moment's notice, and we just don't know when or where the next one will come from, but we're prepared for that. We're using some federal money that we received from, or will be receiving from the CARES Act, and also seeking some money from FEMA to help us with that. The other thing we did is, as you probably know, we have an ongoing contractual relationship with all the shelters in the state. So beyond the need for wellness shelters and distancing, and beyond the need for hotel rooms, there are just the basic day-to-day needs that shelters have: staffing, overtime, supplies, and we quickly stood up, again, using state home funds, a shelter grant program. Describe to us your need, and we can get money out to you so you can hire that staff, keep people working, and buy the supplies that you need to just simply operate your shelter. So in total, between the wellness shelters and the shelter grant and the hotels, there's about $3 million worth of investment there to provide a structure or a network for people who are homeless. One of the big takeaways, as I mentioned before, is we need a new system. We need a new shelter system. We need a new approach. And working closely with the statewide homeless council, the continuum of care, and the advocates around the state, we've begun to put a framework together of what such a system might look like. And we're going to be putting that in front of the decision makers on the coronavirus relief funds, asking for a significant investment that will allow us to achieve this goal of just a simply better shelter system than we currently have. I think it's an opportunity, a one-time opportunity we have to make a significant difference for generations to come. And finally, during this whole period of time of helping with rent relief and our homeless shelters, we've not taken our eye off the ball of recovery, the opioid issue and recovery residences. There were 2 pieces of legislation, significant legislation, that were passed. One of them, we've actually got funds flowing on both of those efforts. We have, I think, Senator Bellows, you sponsored one bill. We've got 5 recovery residences under contract now, with a dozen more that we're working with. Very close program, working closely with the Maine Association of Recovery Residences and Gordon Smith and his team. We've got 5 under contract. And then another bill that passed provided funding in York and Cumberland counties for more of a scattered site approach for recovery residences. So even throughout this period of time, we've been able to keep those efforts going, and we're proud of the work that we have done there. So with that, those are kind of the prepared overview that I had, and if I can answer any questions, I'll be happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Director Brennan. I do know that our committee members do have questions for you, and I'll be starting their video in hopes that we don't have any technical difficulties. And I will start your video, but if you don't come through, we'll stop your video again. I'm just going to go down through the whole list of committee members so that everyone gets a chance to ask a question, and then we'll cycle back through. Representative Sylvester and then Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Director Brennan, for being here today. I wanted to speak a little bit more about the rent relief program and to ask you, I'm glad to hear that it'll be an ongoing program through the summer and that we'll be using some of the federal money for that. My question is, do we anticipate that people who have already applied for the state program will be able to reapply for the ongoing program so that folks who have already received relief but are still underwater, the $500 was not quite enough, or they've had continuing debts, will be able to reapply for the federal money program?
So the current extension will remain a one-time effort. I see my video is being requested to start, so okay. The continuation of the program for June will remain a one-time to allow additional people who have not received assistance to continue to receive assistance. What we're looking ahead, as we look ahead to July, the federal funds that we'll be using will be allowed to go retroactively back. We're working out some of those details. We realize that the $500 is not covering the entire rent. Statistics that we have published on our webpage will show that it's going quite a ways. In the northern parts and more remote parts of the state, it's upwards of 70 or 80% of the rent. In Portland and south, it's about 45 to 50%. So we're proud of that and looking at ways beginning in July to have some retroactivity as people still continue to struggle.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the update today. Appreciate all you do. I have a couple questions. One is...
Senator Guerin, last time the committee members felt that it wasn't fair that some committee members dominated the conversation, so we're going to go through the whole committee once and then we'll go back for follow-ups.
Okay. My first question then is on the rent relief program, which I think was a great idea. And now a lot of Mainers do have their unemployment plus the $600 a week, so a good time to get caught up on your rent. But what I am hearing from landlords in my district and throughout the state is that there's some misunderstanding by renters that the landlords are getting payments from the government to meet their rental, the rent payments by the renters. And we certainly don't want to have a collapse of the private rental industry because that would put such a burden on Maine state housing if the rental industry collapsed. So I wondered if it would be possible for Maine state housing to put out some kind of robust notice that you are responsible for your rent and you should be paying it now that, you know, as soon as you get your unemployment, back payments, get caught up on your rent because that is a one-time payment, the $500.
Yes, thank you for that. You're absolutely correct. And that's very consistent with the messaging and we can continue to continue with that messaging. We are very sensitive to both the needs of the renters and of the landlords. Renters do need to continue to pay their rent. This $500 is helping them one time, but they're still obligated for that rent, and we can work on continuing to message that.
Thank you. I know Representative Rikerson has a question and then Representative Bradstreet. Representative Rikerson, you're on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Brennan. I thought it was very exciting that you mentioned that we need a new system for homelessness. And I'm just wondering if this is an extensive enough change so that we do need some policy recommendations from this committee or from the legislature or some actually legislation.
Potentially. At this point, we are in sort of the visioning stage. The work of the statewide homeless council, which is a broad representation of homeless shelters and advocates around the state, have come together and provided a framework, if you will. And now we'll get going on exactly how we can go ahead and achieve it. I will say that the concept of regionalization and having a more regional approach, regions are different throughout the state from one another, and there are natural collaborations that can be achieved within a particular community or within a particular geographic region. I believe that there will be a significant need for capital funding because I think more physical structures will need to maybe smaller physical structures. So as we go through that process, if legislation is needed, certainly we'll be including your thoughts as a committee and reaching out and getting your ideas. So we'll share more as we go ahead. But it is I believe, a generational opportunity, a one-time to make a significant change. And we're seeing this in other areas around the country as well. So I appreciate those thoughts.
Thank you.
Representative Bradstreet and then Senator Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for being here. And I thank you for your staff as well. You people have been very busy and your work is much appreciated. First, I'd like to reiterate and stress what Senator Guerin said. I've been getting calls and emails from landlords who I think that some people are taking advantage of the situation. I'm glad that you're working on that. I appreciate that. The question I have is, you mentioned briefly about you're worried about delinquencies and foreclosures looking ahead, and unfortunately that looks like that may be a situation we'll have to face, and I'm glad it's on your radar. And you said you'd be prepared for it. Could you give us some idea of how you're preparing for that?
Sure. From we're a bank in that respect, and therefore when we can position our cash and our liquidity to absorb financial shocks, our treasurer and head of our finance department are constantly looking at ways that as a bank we can absorb, and we're a very successful bank, and we have built up a healthy balance sheet over the years. So there are some maneuverings that you can do with your investments and your bonds and things along that nature. We have the experience of 2008, 2009, 2010. It's not the same type of crisis, but we learned a lot in those years about reaching out to borrowers. We have a couple of programs that we offer that allow the forbearance or delay of mortgage payments, and we've got that program up. So we've also got a wonderful loan servicing department that are employing some of the best practices that are out there to help our borrowers, so we're ready for it. We hope it's not as bad as we fear, but we prepare for it in that way. And to your point, and the point about landlords, if I could, landlords are absolutely critical to the mission of Maine State Housing Authority. And an op-ed that I did a few months ago, I called upon renters to, work with your landlords. It's absolutely critical that renters realize they remain responsible for their rent. As I mentioned, today we'll be going out with a press release in conjunction with the governor's office. And I'm actually we're stressing it in there again. Can't stress that enough. We work closely with landlord associations around the state and continue to maintain those relationships. And again, landlords are critical to the mission of Maine Housing, so we're very sensitive to making sure that they're able to operate their properties and their businesses, and we thank them for all they do.
Thank you. I know Senator Lawrence is next, and then Representative Austin, and then Representative Carney. Senator Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Director, for being here. And I deeply appreciate all the work you're doing at Maine State Housing Authority. It's good to see that being done. I'm looking out, kind of thinking about this winter, and kind of we've seen nationally projections that there is a strong potential of another spike in COVID-19. And we're at a time of extraordinarily low oil prices. And it's possible oil prices will rise next year. Have you done any, or are you thinking about doing scenarios of what that will mean for Maine State housing during the winter in order to prepare for that potential?
We've been in contact with our congressional delegation regarding our funding for the HEAP program, which is absolutely critical to providing the heating assistance that's needed in our winter months. We've adjusted our program over the years to be as efficient and quick as we can. So we're always looking at ways that we can more efficiently get that money in the hands of the oil dealers and heating providers that are out there. We did receive an additional $3 million of heating assistance fund in the first CARES Act. And we were on the phone with Senator Collins' office this week talking about another request. So I think the more that we can advocate for the funds, we have a system that we think is working pretty well, but we're always looking ahead. And every year we prepare to go into the winter time thinking that it's going to be an absolutely horrible winter. This year, we know that people are going to be hurting, and we will make other changes as we get ready to go into the winter months. So I appreciate your thoughts about that.
Thank you.
Representative Austin, you have a question? Representative Austin, can you hear us? It looks a little bit like your computer is frozen. We'll go to Representative Carney. We'll ask IT to help Representative Austin with her feed, and then we'll come back to Representative Austin. Representative Carney.
Hi, thank you. And thank you so much for being here today at the briefing. It really helps us as a committee, and it helps the public understand the work you're doing when you share the information in this forum. I'm thinking about August and when the courts reopen for forcible entry and detainer cases and other landlord-tenant matters. And I'm wondering what you have heard about the situation with renters. Are we, how they're navigating the financial impact of the pandemic? Are we expecting a flood of evictions? Are we concerned that we're going to have people and large numbers of families become homeless? Should our communities begin thinking about how we can provide shelter? Or do you feel like we have a system and some time to plan and take care of those issues?
Well, I think that communities should always be planning on ways that they can shelter persons who end up homeless. I think that regardless of the circumstances, we want to work to build a different system. So, and community involvement is where that happens. It doesn't happen from the state writing a check and saying, shelter people. It comes from all community members and not only the public health, the nonprofits, the hospitals, everybody's got to work, city managers and leaders. So they should always be planning. I honestly don't know what to expect. I will tell you that the rental receipts, the pace at which people are paying their rent through April and through May has been better than we hoped. We initially thought that it was going to be much worse. I'm not saying it's not going to be much worse as we head in, but reports from the landlord associations that we talk to, who have actually very good data that they collect from their members, and we're so thankful for that. Our own real estate managers that manage the portfolio of properties that we invest in report the same. So delinquencies are up, but not as bad as we had hoped. The message we've been trying to put out is that nobody should lose their home because of COVID-19. And I think the stimulus checks and I think the unemployment are positively impacting people's ability to pay their rent. We're hoping that continues. I am afraid that there will be a spike in evictions, and there are cases where people are choosing not to pay their rent because they know they can't be evicted, and that's just not a good thing to do. People should always be working to pay their rent, work with their landlords. So we'll see. We're in close contact with advocates in the area, and as we get closer and see what occurs, we'll be ready to adjust our approach if needed. But it's our philosophy anyway.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that you have the data and your description of how it's looking. That's really helpful information.
Thank you.
Representative Austin, I believe you're back. Welcome. You had a question for Director Brennan. It looks like your mic is muted. You can unmute. Here, there you go.
Senator, thank you very much. Dan, thank you for being with us. I have one of those, it's a very similar question. I heard from a constituent who has some units, and it appears that one of their occupants has decided that because this is the virus that we're getting through, that he doesn't need to pay either. And what process can this owner, how should I assist him in proceeding? What should, again, just say what you've been saying, that this is a must? I'm wondering if it's one of those cases where the owner says that he is capable of paying, but he's just decided that he doesn't need to during this, and he probably thinks that there's certainly a reassurance that he can't be dislodged or evacuated from his rent. So can you give me a little advice on that?
Well, I think one of the things that we are putting out is we're hoping that people act with the best of intentions. And this is a case where, they're just being misinformed. They are responsible for their rent. It's a legal obligation. And I think they're putting themselves at risk by deciding not to. If there's any way that we can help in a specific situation, you can always call our office and we can help impart the message directly. But it's really incumbent upon renters to pay their obligation, landlords to understand that renters are at a tough time right now. If everyone just works together, banks need to understand that landlords are in a tough spot too. So if everyone just works together, but in cases where people are choosing not to, I don't have a specific answer for you on that, but just a concern that people should be acting in their best interests, and just walking away from an obligation is in my opinion, not a smart move to do.
Thank you very much.
So I believe everyone on the committee who's had an initial question has had an opportunity. I'm going to cycle back through because I know Representative Sylvester had an additional question and Senator Guerin had an additional question. And if members of the committee, if you do have a question, feel free to let me know. Oh, mute your phone.
All right, I think I'm all set now. Welcome again. Thank you, Director. My question is a follow-up on my last question in terms of the processing. Do you envision that the new rent program will also be moved through the CAPS program, and will CAP, if you've already put in an application, will those roll over? I mean, have you been able to get that deep into the discussion yet in terms of what the process might look like, how people can check their application process, all of those sorts of things?
Yeah, so we do intend to still use the community action agencies, and that is a desire as well of the Department of Economic and Community Development, whose funds we'll be administering. We have a close relationship and a very positive relationship with our community action agencies. The beauty of working with a community action agency is when a person presents themselves even virtually or over the phone to a community action agency, a contact is made. And there are many other resources that community action agencies provide than just a rental assistance. So it gives an opportunity to ask more questions about what the need of each household is. So we think that that is an effective network, and the folks at DECD have been using them as well for a number of years. So it's sort of a natural partnership. In terms of the specifics of applications, we have not gotten into that level of detail, Representative, but we'll follow up to make sure that it's clear, and as people apply through that program, they'll know and understand how that program is structured.
Thank you very much, Director.
I inadvertently passed over Representative Donna Dorr. Representative Donna Dorr, I'm going to invite your video to be turned on and ask you to go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Senator. My question has been answered. I think Representative Austin, as well as someone else, was asking about landlords, because I've also been contacted by landlords who knows that some of his or her renters have received that $500 and they're just not paying their rent. So I think Mr. Brennan has already answered my question, but thank you for the opportunity.
Terrific. Director Brennan, I do have one question. So this morning I received a distraught call from a mother. Her adult daughter and son with significant disabilities has been staying with her because she was evicted just before the pandemic started. She went to a motel in my district, but because of the economic crisis, is out of money, and so came to stay with her mother in my district, and her mother is a renter herself, and of course, 2 other adults are not on the lease, and so that landlord has said, you have to vacate the property within a couple of days. What resources are available for people like this constituent? Because one of my concerns, we're going to move into unemployment, and I see that Samantha Warren is here from the University of Maine system and is going to talk with us a little bit about UMaine's homeless activities. But one of my concerns is that I'm well aware that there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of Mainers who've been unable to access legitimate unemployment assistance through the Reemployment system, and may be in a very similar situation to the constituent whose mother called me in tears this morning.
So I would ask you, Senator, to share the details with us offline, and we can reach out and see learn more about that specific situation. We do that on a regular basis. When we hear of specific things, we want the specifics, and we can, sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Sometimes we can refer to another area or another agency. So that would be my first request. And when we become aware of things, we're able to act. And so we'll be happy to receive that and try and help as best we can.
So if there's someone listening in at home and they've missed 3 rental payments, which is, I have another constituent who said to me, I've missed 3 rental payments, and I know that she has a legitimate unemployment claim. And I said, absolutely talk to your landlord, keep that conversation going. Yeah. But if someone's listening at home and they're in a similar situation where they're facing imminent homelessness, they should contact their elected representative or senator, and then we can communicate with Maine Housing to get them assistance potentially for short-term or long-term solutions. Okay, terrific. Senator Guerin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just one comment on the rental thing before I go on with my question. Perhaps you could make up a good Facebook post that we could share through the legislature's Facebook pages that explains that people are responsible for paying their rent, because I think there is a widespread belief in the in the renters community that the government is paying the rent, and it's great we're paying 1 month, but where we're not paying continually, we don't want people to get in the position of being evicted. We'll be happy to do so. Thank you. So my question is, I was happy to hear that you're using the hotels for some of the homeless housing because I know they're desperate for business. Do you know if there's been any reports of spread of COVID to staff through those hotel guests?
Not that I'm aware of, but that wouldn't be a level of detail. I have not heard of that, but the virus moves so quickly in some cases, so I can't specifically answer that for you. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Bradstreet, you have a follow-up for Director Brennan, and I do want to just let everybody know that the University of Maine is here in the Zoom as well, so we're going to allow them. They wrote out some really thoughtful testimony that they shared with us about their efforts to combat homelessness. So.
Actually, this relates to that. Perhaps I should wait, but anyway, I was just going to ask that if any contingency's been made for, should the University of Maine system open up in the fall and those dorm rooms that are utilized now no longer going to be available. So
yeah,
I think there may be something in the report.
Absolutely. Why don't we wait for the Director of Government and Community Relations, Sam Warren, who is with us today. Do any committee members have any burning questions for Director Brennan? And of course, Director Brennan, we'd like you to stay on the line while Director Warren shares her remarks and then answers questions, just because there is that relationship between Maine Housing and the university system that has been so important in addressing homelessness. We're really grateful for that. But any last questions from committee members? You can use the raise your hand function in the Zoom meeting. Okay, I'm not seeing any, and of course you'll still have an opportunity. So I want to welcome Sam Warren, is Director of Government and Community Relations for the University of Maine System. Welcome, Director Warren. We're really glad that you could join us today. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and this is my first time virtually testifying, so forgive me for the awkwardness that you guys have already experienced yourselves and have gotten over. So I did prepare some formal remarks because that's how we often do things, and I'm just going to walk through those, and hopefully they'll be shared with the committee. It feels somewhat silly to be so formal in this virtual setting, but I do want to say hello to Senator Bellows, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the committee, and again introduce myself. I am Sam Warren, and I'm the Director of Government and Community Relations for your public university system, which, as you are hopefully well aware, has really uniquely stepped up to serve the state's needs in the fight against COVID-19. And so on behalf of the system, and in particular universities of Southern Maine and University of Maine at Presque Isle, I really appreciate the opportunity to be included in this briefing so we can share with you the success of two of our efforts, which, as Director Brennan already mentioned, is the repurposing of campus gyms into temporary shelters so that individuals experiencing homelessness could adhere to physical distancing requirements. So as you'll recall, even before the legislature had adjourned and there was a single positive case of COVID-19 confirmed in our state, Chancellor Malloy made the decision to close our campuses and transition to remote instruction for our students and work for all of our employees. At the time, in the halls of the legislature, I took some flack for that, but ultimately I would point out that this action prevented tens of thousands of our students from coming back to communities across Maine after spring break, potentially from places where the virus was more widespread. And it also, probably as importantly, allowed us to quickly make our public resources, including our people, our supplies, and our space, available as needed to the state in the fight against COVID-19. So what we did within days of the public health emergency being declared was provide the Mills administration with a list of university facilities that could be easily brought into service for the state's efforts, including the Sullivan Gym at USM's Portland campus. We also did something that proved to be a really good early investment in our time, and that was entering into a very unique agreement with NEMA that allowed our facilities and other resources to be deployed in coordinated support of the state's efforts, and perhaps as importantly, with the state's legal protection. And as you're probably aware, the community college entered into a similar agreement. And so that's essentially made the university an agency or quasi-independent agency, much like Maine Housing, of the state during this crisis. So even before that agreement was signed, DHHS and Maine Housing approached the university, I think it was a Saturday, about the possibility of standing up a 50-bed wellness and prevention shelter at the Sullivan Gym at USM that would be staffed by Preble Street and alleviate shelter and provide shelter for healthy adults. And it would alleviate the crowding at the city's Oxford Street shelter, where cots were literally stacked, head to toe, with barely inches between them. And so 13 days later, the 24/7 Sullivan Wellness Shelter was soft open to 20 clients, and within a couple days had expanded to 30 more. And I'm talking fast because I know I have a short amount of time, but I don't want us to not dwell on how impressive of a feat it was to open a homeless shelter, 24/7 shelter, literally in less than 2 weeks. That is unprecedented, and something that you all should really take pride in, that the public servants and the provider community in Maine made that happen. In that time, Preble Street hired and trained staff. The space was set up to support physical distancing. Policies and procedures were developed, including for regular health screening. Supplies were procured, which, as you'll remember, at that time was no easy feat, including portable bathrooms and a hand washing station so that everyone walking in and out of the shelter, whether staff or client, would wash their hands. And cleaning and food service contractors were also brought on board. And the latter was the university's food service provider, which was wonderful because they were no longer providing dining services for the university. So this allowed them to recall some of their laid off staff. The shelter will celebrate its 2-month birthday tomorrow. And in that time, it has served 81 individuals. The clients have ranged in age from 20 to 77 years old, with the majority of clients being ages 40 or older, including 10 clients who are over the age of 60. The transformative impact on the physical and mental health of the clients who have been in this unique shelter cannot be overstated. The folks at Preble Street who staff the shelter have been wonderful at sharing success stories with us, and kind of these vignettes of clients and what the shelter has done for them. And I provided a few in the testimony, and would love to share others with you. But, people who have had, horrible infections in their legs that are exacerbated by being on the street, having a place to rest around the clock has totally transformed their health. We had, clients say that they have never in their entire lives had such a comfortable place to live, and wondered what they did to deserve such a wonderful place as a university gym with a cot. So very powerful stories that we're so glad that Preble Street really keeps at the focus of our shared partnership. What's really wonderful is that we are a university that has educational programs in addition to all this wonderful public service we do. And so social work students at USM have had the opportunity to work and volunteer in the shelter. And one of the students, I shared with her shared with you some of her comments here, but she said seeing the expressions on people's faces coming into this huge roomy shelter with a cot that's raised off the floor, they're so grateful. I'm proud that USM is being part of the solution. And I really need to, in addition to all the partners, really point out another partner, which was the residential neighborhood of Oakdale, which this shelter was suddenly placed in. They have been wonderfully welcoming, and there are so many examples of that, including on Easter morning, a neighbor dropping off candy for shelter clients and staff, and a local pastor leading a service in the parking lot for fewer than 10 individuals, of course. That said, there have been challenges. There have been mental health crises, substance abuse crises, including overdoses. More recently, some of the neighbors have raised concern, in part because of the warmer weather, and in part because smoking is prohibited by federal law on university campuses. It is happening on the sidewalk instead, and that is raising issues in the residential neighborhood. But at every turn, we've worked with the staff at Preble Street as well as DHHS and Maine Housing kind of mitigate the current situation or manage the current situation and put in place practices to hopefully mitigate future incidents. Perhaps most importantly, when 2 shelter guests tested positive for COVID-19 in late April, the state was wonderful. They quickly set up universal testing, not only for all of the clients, but all of the staff, as well as university and other contractors who had been in and out of this space. And not a single person of the more than 50 tested were positive. And so that really reinforces that physical distancing works and that the health and safety practices we put into place work as well. What's great about this project is that it has inspired others like it across the state. So our early learnings were shared with Community Concepts, which created a similar shelter in Lewiston, Auburn, and also informed a collaborative in Aroostook County, led by Aroostook County Action Program, ACAP, that set up a wellness shelter in the Wadeen Gym at the University of Maine at Presque Isle, which also happened in just a matter of days and was in partnership with Maine Housing. That shelter is called the Hope and Prosperity Wellness Shelter. 15 individuals have been served there, ranging in ages 19 to 57. In addition to safe housing and meals also provided by the university's food service vendor, Sodexo, clients were provided mental health services, substance abuse treatment. They were connected to primary care providers, and they were also connected to educational resources. And in keeping with the hope and promise of its name, 5 clients from that shelter have been placed in permanent safe housing, including a veteran. 4 have gained employment, and 2 have begun working towards their high school diploma or its equivalency. And the shelter director from ACAP sent me a picture this morning of one of the clients who had just passed his English course, and they bought him a cake, and it said, congratulations on passing your English course. It's a really wonderful success. As one client said, I've had a lot of help and encouragement here that I've never received, if ever, in my life. And I'm grateful to the people who have taken the time to invest in me and help me realize my true potential and what I have within me. So just a beautiful story at that shelter as well, which we're so proud to play a small role in. So to get to Representative Bradstreet's questions, and I think others that have been raised probably before I came onto the call, it is the university's goal, as well as all of the higher eds in the state of Maine, to open safely this fall. And so we are beginning to make plans for our university employees, as well as students, to safely return starting as early as July, which means that the shelter space needs to transition back to campus use, which is we're glad to move forward and get back to the kind of core mission of the university, but it's certainly challenging to think about the future for some of these clients. So the really positive news is that ACAP in Aroostook County believes that they will be able to secure safe, stable housing for the 8 clients who remain in that shelter by July 1st, and that they will be able to then transition that back to the university's use. Meanwhile, we've put in place a target date for the Sullivan shelter to close by mid-July, and there is an exhaustive search underway that I think Maine Housing could maybe speak more about for an alternative shelter site. It is proving very challenging to find a space that can accommodate this number of people in the kind of configuration that they need to be in to promote physical distancing, and then not only finding the space, but finding a space that actually wants to be used in this way. So that is a big challenge, and again, the university can probably speak least to that, but we'll continue to play a part in those conversations. As you are all aware, I would say the pandemic has uniquely exposed the inequities that exist in our society, but we know from outbreaks in places that did not adopt similar practices to support distancing for vulnerable populations that these wellness shelters that we hosted on our public university campus saved lives and prevented the further spread of disease in our communities. So not just protecting the homeless population, but those around the community who they interact with. We're, of course, very grateful to have served Maine's needs in this way and to work with Preble Street, ACAP, DHHS, and Maine Housing, who do really difficult, important work every day. I would close by just reminding legislators that later this month, a bill that had been sponsored by Representative Mike Brennan and had been supported unanimously by the Education Committee to improve college completion among homeless youth will go into effect. And that bill encourages, it does not mandate, but it encourages that both the university and the community college systems designate homeless student liaisons on each of our campuses. So as you're probably aware, K through 12 public school districts have a McKinney-Vento homeless student liaison. And so it brings a similar model to our college campuses. And it also encourages us to prioritize housing resources for students experiencing homelessness. And I would just say we were obviously very committed to serving this population before, but as a result of our experience working on the shelter, I think we're even more resolute to do so, to serve these students effectively and empathetically, because we know that public education is the best path to a more stable and prosperous future. So happy to answer any of your questions. And again, we really appreciate the opportunity to have been able to partner in this way and to share this story with you. It's something that you should all take a lot of pride in.
Thank you so much, Director Warren. It's really heartening to hear about the university's partnership with Maine Housing and the state of Maine to address homelessness during this crisis, because obviously being housed is crucial to staying safe and healthy during this time. And earlier, Director Brennan said it's really time for universal systemic change of how we do homelessness, a really revisiting of our entire homeless shelter system. And I think your stories and the successes we've had in these 2 months in this area point a path forward potentially. I know this committee has worked really well together, collaboratively, unanimously on virtually everything that we've done to address homelessness. We're really proud of the work with Cabin in the Woods, for example, in my district, Atogus, to support homeless veterans. So this is really, really helpful. For people listening at home who tuned in at 11 thinking we'd be talking about unemployment already, we will be talking about unemployment. We're just finishing up the conversation that began around 10 o'clock on housing, which is the other really significant portion of our committee work. Representative Bradstreet, Director Warren addressed some of your questions in her remarks. Do you have any additional questions? Okay, Representative Sylvester.
Thank you, Director Warren, for being here today. I was lucky enough, being part of the Portland delegation, to have been part of a couple of briefings on the process as it was starting and as it was continuing, and it's why I thought it was so important that the rest of the committee hear about this today, knowing a bit about what Maine State Housing's plan to try to expand and reimagine homeless shelters in this state. And as usual, you have been so thorough in your briefing that you've covered most of my questions. But I wanted to sort of highlight, the fact of what happens when community core agencies and government agencies and the community at large come together to make a difference in people's lives, and to highlight the comment that you made about how this effort really was about health containment, was about safety, not only for the people who are in the shelters, but for the city at large. And we thank you for that. And I guess my only question is, I am hoping that somebody is documenting the processes that you went through, both the challenges and the benefits that you've highlighted to the people and to the community and to the university itself, it sounds like, so that people can use this as a model going forward.
Great. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for Director Warren? I don't see any in the chat or raising their hand, but I'm going to pause for 1 minute just in case I or someone else is a little slow on the uptake. Well, I don't see any. Director Warren, Director Brennan, Peter Merrill, who is Director of Legislative Affairs for the Maine Housing Agency and has been on as well as a resource. We thank you for your work during this crisis and helping keep Maine's homeless population safe and healthy and helping keep our communities safe and healthy. We think the creativity is incredible and really helpful. So just want to thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate your time. So
Thank you.
we're just going to pause for 1 minute, not 5, just to, I want to invite all the members to start your videos so that we can see one another. I'm going to actually create those invitations, so please accept the invitation to start your video, and we are going to transition into unemployment. I'm also going to start the video of our analyst, so she can be with us. She's been taking careful notes, and I neglected to introduce her at the outset. It's Deirdre Schneider, who is here at this moment in time. Senator Guerin, I'll be with you in 1 minute. Deirdre, for some reason, I'm trying to start your video if you're available. Oh. All right. There's a problem with some of the videos, but we will have, Deirdre, can you speak? Do we have audio for you?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, terrific. Great. So, Deirdre, I do not see the Department of Labor in the waiting room. I know that we had sent them the Zoom link yesterday and that they had confirmed receipt of the Zoom link. Have you received a formal communication from the Department of Labor stating that they would or would not be here today?
I have not. I had just received the email saying, thank you for sending the link, but didn't include if they would be participating, and if so, who would be participating on their behalf.
So I am astonished. There were informal communications that suggested that the Department of Labor would not be present here today at 11 o'clock. I reiterated my fervent hope to Commissioner Fortman this morning that she would in fact be present at 11 o'clock as invited in a formal letter from Representative Sylvester and me. I have to say, I've always had deep respect for Governor Janet Mills and Department of Labor Commissioner Laura Fortman. I know they care deeply about the people of the state, but I also know that there are hundreds, maybe thousands of Mainers listening or watching this committee meeting today looking for answers. And I do not understand why Commissioner Fortman is not here today. It is particularly concerning. I and Democrats on this committee spoke out when Governor LePage refused to allow his commissioner to come to the Labor Committee in the last administration. It was wrong then, and it is wrong now. It's unconscionable for any administration to refuse to answer questions from constituents who have reached out to us, their representatives, for help, and are watching this committee meeting today. And I would just point the committee and the administration to Title 3, Chapter 7, Subchapter 1, Section 165. The law states that a State Department shall furnish an information. Each State Department shall furnish to a committee such documents, material, or information as may be requested by the committee. So I have a few comments and a few questions I wish to express, and then I will recognize members of the committee, each in turn, to make comments and questions. But I just want to say it's been more than 2 months since the COVID-19 pandemic upended the lives of thousands of Maine workers and small businesses. In the month of April, we learned that from the official data that there were 98,400 Mainers who were removed from payroll, who lost their jobs. All across the state, hardworking people found themselves without a job overnight, their businesses closed. And it's true, our unemployment system saw an unprecedented spike in unemployment cases that we have never seen in the state. Back in March and early April, glitches and issues with the unemployment system were frustrating but understandable. But we have passed the point of understanding. The outstanding cases, the continued issues, the lack of transparency, the unwillingness to come to our committee are all unacceptable. At this point in the pandemic, I know workers who've gone more than 2 months without the benefits they deserve. That's at least 2 months where workers have not had any income to pay a rent or a mortgage, utilities, or groceries. We received data today that the Maine Department of Labor has paid out over $650 million in unemployment benefits. And they shared the number of weekly certifications and claims. But that means nothing to the people who are on the brink of losing everything and still can't get the benefits they're owed. And it means nothing if the department can't make themselves available to answer questions. I've heard that Maine is in the top 10 compared to other states, but honestly, where Maine stands compared to other states is not the question. I'm getting calls from constituents and they're not just angry, they're scared. So these are the metrics I'm using to evaluate this situation. I'm evaluating the situation based on people who can't go to the doctor for help. I heard from April, a constituent with significant health issues. Her claim was finally approved, she thought, just a week ago. She began receiving some initial benefits, although not her back pay. And then a hold was placed just last week because of the fraud claims that affected the entire country. She was supposed to see a specialist for her health conditions on Monday, June 1st. But she had to cancel. She couldn't afford even the copay. This was an appointment she had scheduled 2 months ago. So now nor can she pay due rent. So she's waiting an additional 2 months to see her doctor, and she's worried about homelessness, something we just discussed. People are still waiting on the federal pandemic unemployment assistance. Kayla texted us this morning. She's the mother of 2 children with autism. She applied for unemployment on March 25th before the PUA was rolled out. Representatives of the department have been telling her and our staff for weeks that her claim should automatically roll over to the PUA and that it's in process. She continues to file her weekly certifications. And still, she has not received any benefits. This morning she said, "I've lost all faith in the system." We've heard from seniors who are at the end of their careers who never applied for unemployment, some of them, who'd paid into the system for their whole lives. A 65-year-old man named Jim reached out to me. His doctor told him he shouldn't work because of his active cancer treatment and his high risk. That was March. It's now June. He has kept a detailed record of every call to the department. 234 calls and no benefits. He hasn't been able to pay any of his bills, especially his medical bills that are piling up due to his cancer. And now, in his hour of need, he can't access his benefits. Yesterday, he tried a 235th time, and he reached someone, and they said, "We're sorry, we don't know what's wrong with your case. We can't fix it yet." So he's still waiting for help. And how many people out there would have the patience to call 235 times? There are other people like Jim who haven't received benefits for this entire crisis. Last night I talked to Ashley. She's the mother of 3 kids. She lost her job due to the pandemic when the business closed on March 20th. She tried over and over and over and over again, and finally on May 28th, she reached someone and was told that there was an error made by another DOL employee on her claim, but that it would be fixed and she would see benefits, and it looked like they were processing. Until yesterday, it said, "Your claim processed on 6/2. Well, there's no money in her account, none whatsoever. Ashley's problem is actually one that a department employee reached out to me about last week. They said there's a new computer system problem where people are seeing that their payments are processing, but the money doesn't actually flow into their accounts. It's a glitch. The department is getting many calls on this. We're trying to get the computer people to fix it, but it's not fixed yet." The department isn't running the computer system is running the Department of Labor. And these stories are heartbreaking, but they represent just a fraction of what lawmakers have heard over the past 2 months. And each of these stories represents thousands more Mainers. April, for example, is one of over 1,000 legitimate Mainers who appear to have had their claims canceled by the computer system because of the fraud issue. Kayla is one of a whole group of people, thousands who applied apparently for PUA too soon, who've been promised they would be automatically rolled over, but the computer system won't roll them over. Employees in the department tell me they have been raising these issues with tech support, with the independent contractor who runs Reemployment for weeks to no avail. And that's just the workers. Employers are having a horrible time too. I got a panicked call from a major employer in my district last week. The identities of many of his employees have been stolen, including himself, for unemployment fraud. On the employer portal sides, there's no place for him to report the fraud. He tried calling the number of the Department of Labor and couldn't get through. Another employer texted me this morning. She is simply overwhelmed. She gets 4 pieces of paper for every unemployed worker every week. She signed up for the online system, but the Department of Labor tells her she has to fill out paper for the people that became unemployed prior to her signing up for the electronic system. She tells me, I'm just overwhelmed. I talked to another employer today. He called me. He said he has someone who was unemployed back in October, and he received a letter today saying that it's due to COVID-19, and so his experience rating won't be affected. He said that's not due to COVID-19, and I should be taxed for that. I want to pay when I need to pay. And is this a systemic problem? And he's right, it is. Maine is facing some of the greatest challenges our state has ever experienced, and the way we solve this is not secrecy or backdoor channels or backdoor conversations. We solve this by working together and coming up with collaborative, creative, innovative solutions. We are looking to partner with the administration on these issues. Every single member of this committee has expertise we'd like to share. We'd like to share what we're hearing from constituents. We want to be allies, but we cannot be allies without being part of the conversation, especially if our concerns or the concerns of our constituents are dismissed. Our job as legislators is to represent the people in our district to the best of our ability. It's to answer questions, raise issues, elevate voices. I have several pages here that I am not going to read without a member of the Department of Labor to answer them. I've got questions from constituents and colleagues. I've got questions from employees within the Maine Department of Labor who are reporting problems with the system itself that have not been answered. These are the types of questions that our constituents, that Mainers deserve to have answers to. And so, the next steps for this committee will to hold a virtual public conversation with constituents. Our constituents deserve to be heard. We need to do so safely. We need to do so virtually. But it is time that their voices and their questions are answered. And so with that, I'm going to invite each member of the committee one by one to address. I know Representative Sylvester has some thoughts, and then Senator Guerin. And I'll go down through the list. And thank you.
I'm going to have to speak to the camera. Because honestly, I prepared some remarks, but I didn't believe that I would have to use them today, and that the Department of Labor and the Commissioner would not appear. So I will speak to the camera. Let me just begin by saying that to the dozens and dozens of people who reached out to me hoping that they would have questions today, that I am deeply disappointed that I'm unable to ask their questions of the Commissioner of Labor. There are new systems that were announced at the 11th hour before this hearing that I was hoping to ask about in detail, systems that would help people identify themselves who have been held up by the fraud checks, and a new system for legislators to be able to raise concerns, both of which would have been great to hear about today, as well as many of the problems. Two of the goals for calling this hearing were to gain these processes, and we thank the governor's offices for instituting them. But having said that, to the myriad other questions this committee has, and to the hundreds of people that I've spoken to since the last hearing, and that I had promised to get answers to their questions at this hearing. People like Mark, who is watching his bank account dwindle to single digits while his bills are on his kitchen table are in the hundreds of dollars. And people like Irma, who have been trying to navigate this system faithfully, doing everything that she was told, but still is unable to get her claim out of limbo and can't get a communication about why. I'm deeply disappointed that the governor has declined to allow Commissioner Fortman to be here today. As the House Chair, I feel that I can say on behalf of my colleagues in the House that the people in our communities are hurting, and the communication has been abysmal. Let me re-amplify that point. Communication between the DOL and legislators, between the DOL and constituents trying to file for benefits, has been the #1 failure as people have tried to navigate this unemployment system and the technology behind it. And so the decision not to allow the Committee of Oversight to ask questions on behalf of the people is incredibly disrespectful, not to me or any of us here today, but to the citizens of this state who are asking why and who are asking when. Therefore, as Senator Bellows has said, and at the suggestion of Representative Rikerson, we're announcing that we were going to hold this virtual public hearing to hear directly from those who have been unable to secure the benefits that they deserve, to hear from employers who have been trying to navigate the system, to seek suggestions as to how this process can go better in the future, and to allow people to voice their frustrations in trying to get real answers. And perhaps most importantly, to let the governor hear the real impact that it has had on Mainers' ability to shelter in place and know that their family's economic security is secure. So the people of Maine, and to the people of Maine, know that this committee will hear you when you call. We will pick up the phone, and we will release the details and procedures on this virtual hearing as soon as we have them. Yet still, this committee and the legislators of Maine will continue to demand answers as to when people will receive their benefits and what the problems are. We hope these new processes will be transparent and that they will help, and we hope that folks will get the benefits that they've deserved, and particularly those who have already navigated the process and are now being held up from the fraud investigations. Yet, we are working on it is not an answer that the people of Maine or this committee or the legislators of the state of Maine will accept any longer from this administration. Whether the answers are good, whether the answers are ugly, we want to hear them, we want them to be transparent, and we want to work in collaboration. And we expect that the commissioners of this state will work in collaboration with the legislative committees. Lastly, and on a personal level, I want to thank all my legislative colleagues who reached out to myself and those on this committee trying to have their constituent cases resolved. Your legislators have answered thousands of calls. Together, we've tried to lift the most egregious cases up to the light of day, and I've continued to argue that as a legislator, you shouldn't have to be the chair of a committee to get an answer to a question. You shouldn't have to hold a hearing to ask them. And you certainly shouldn't have to be told that the answers aren't worth the time of a public official. So we will hope that these new processes work. I am an optimist, but having said that, let me be clear that I hope the governor will reverse her decision to allow the Commissioner Fortman to appear before this committee and to answer every last question that my colleagues and their constituents have. And thank you to my colleagues on this committee. I appreciate your public service. I appreciate you being here today to fulfill that service. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Guerin, and then Senator Lawrence, and then Representative Bradstreet.
Well, I am glad to stand with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle this morning to say this is an astounding and outrageous failure of the Mills administration and Labor Commissioner Fortman. meeting the needs of Mainers who are unemployed today has been a total, complete failure. And today that problem has been compounded by the unwillingness of the Mills administration to allow us to address Commissioner Fortman. We are the voice of the people, and she is silencing the voice of Maine citizens who are having a terrible time. Daily, I receive numerous calls and emails from constituents with desperate stories telling me that they have yet to get their benefits have been suspended, they are out of money, they can't pay their rent. I had a gentleman yesterday said, I am out of money for food. We have contacted the Department of Labor 8 times with an elevated case from the Republican office, and that case has still not been resolved after 8 elevated contacts with the Department of Labor. The system has been compromised over 10,000 times by fraud, and now they are asking constituents to send in pictures of their driver's license, passport, military ID, and non-photo documentation, which includes your social security number. If a system has been compromised 10,000 times already, why are we asking people to put their social security number on an email which has been widely broadcast, and potential hackers know that that email address will have people's social security numbers coming to them? It is a terrible idea. I had done some research on what other states are doing. Pennsylvania sends a letter to your home with a PIN number, much like a bank does for a debit card. And they have suspended their online payments and are sending paper checks. We are bleeding the system dry, Governor Mills, and we need some answers for the constituents that we represent. With the total failure of the unemployment system, it's time to put Mainers back to work. Let's reopen Maine and open our tourist season before it is too late.
Senator Lawrence and then Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say in a couple of remarks that I think this situation highlights the importance of having good communication between the legislature and the Department of Labor. And for the Department of Labor and the leadership there, not to see those communications as a threat, but to see that as an assistance to resolving unique problems we all face. I represent a district, and I think I've mentioned in this committee before, that's fairly unique. A great percentage of my district, the constituents in my district, a large percentage work in 3 different states, Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. In addition, the constituents, the people who work in my district,
We will invite Senator Lawrence to come back and have him give his statement. Representative Bradstreet, in interest of, we've lost Senator Lawrence from the Zoom. So Representative Bradstreet, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm just flabbergasted that the commissioner's not here. This is the chance for the representatives of the people to ask questions that are extremely important to her, to them. I was not apprised that she wouldn't be here ahead of time, so I don't have any prepared statements like some people do. I will say this, though, if it's going to be the case where the commissioner is no longer going to be available to the Committee on Labor and Housing, then perhaps it's time for her to tender her resignation to the governor. Thank you.
information that is stored within the Department of Labor system, and how do they protect their identities from other fraud situations. This forum is really the only opportunity we have to ask the public's questions, and it's also really the Department of Labor's opportunity to help people understand what's happening and what they can expect. Even if we don't know, even if the department doesn't know the answers and can't provide concrete guidance, at least they can share with us what they're doing, why people are experiencing these sudden discontinuations of benefits, and to really help people understand what to expect in the future. We're lacking this information, and us as senators and representatives, we feel like we're kind of operating in an information vacuum, and that's not the way our system of government works. We are supposed to be doing the work of the people in an open way so that people understand what their government is doing for them, how their government is doing work for them, and so that the government can respond to the people's needs, and we're not seeing that now.
Thank you, Representative Carney. Representative Morris, then Representative Dorr, then Representative Lockman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo a lot of what has been said. It's very frustrating that the Department of Labor could not be here today to answer the questions that we are continuing to receive about the abysmal response to the unemployment situation. A month ago when we were here, the commissioner told us that she was receiving, or the department was receiving 50,000 phone calls a day, that they were working with LOB and that they were hiring 100 people. Why she's not here today to update us on that is extremely infuriating. And I would wonder how many of those calls are people calling 150, 200 times, because that's the information that I'm getting from my constituents. That they call, they get the message that says, please call back later, so they hang up and they call back right again, and they do that day after day after day, and they still aren't getting anything, and the commissioner's not here to address us about that. She stated that she was going to come out with a new system for us to be able to communicate with the Department of Labor to streamline the system so that we could get our constituents' questions answered. To this date, that system is still not out. We still have not heard anything from it. She also told us a month ago that she is in touch with the governor every single day about these issues. Yet we found out a few weeks ago that prisoners in the Maine state prison system were receiving unemployment benefits. And the governor, her own words were, it's bad public policy. She put a stop to it. Why wasn't the commissioner informing the governor and asking the governor if this was something she wanted to have happen? That's a question I would have had. And again, not here to answer it. I would ask the governor what she's doing to hold the commissioner accountable in that situation. If she says she's in touch with you every day, then why did you allow that to continue? Why not hold her accountable for that? And I will just close by saying to the governor, I am on your economic recovery committee. And we're obviously concerned about making sure that the economy comes back when you feel we're in the clear with this pandemic. It's going to be a lot harder for people to come back if they have continually not been able to receive unemployment. They are having a hard time buying groceries. It's going to be harder for the economy to come back in that situation. And why is not more being done? Why are you not holding your commissioner accountable? My real question is, how much longer are you going to allow Commissioner Fortman to serve, given the problems that we've had going on almost 3 months now? And that's all I have.
Thank you, Representative Morris. I have 2 points of information, a correction to something I said and a correction to something Representative Morris said. I had made the point about Jim, who's worked his entire life, and I said paid into the system. Well, technically it's his employers paid into the system, but I think my constituents out there know what I mean. When people have worked their entire lives and expect that if the government closes their business or they are unable to work, that they will then receive benefits, they assume that's a social contract and an expectation. With regards to what you said, Representative Morris, you're absolutely right. Commissioner Fortman did in fact promise us a new system of dealing with legislative complaints so that all of us who have complaints dating back weeks could finally get some answers. That system did in fact come out before this meeting. I received word of it this morning, and I did convey to the commissioner my thanks for that and reiterated my request and hope that she would be here today. So I just want people to know there is a new system, but for it to take a month, just to echo your frustration, is really, really challenging. And I do know that every single one of us have constituent cases who came to us over a month ago that or weeks ago that we feel like are not getting resolved, and that's concerning. Maybe not every single one of us, but many of us have concerns and cases that date back weeks, and we all know people that have been waiting since March. So sorry to correct you. I just didn't want the public to labor on that
I appreciate that information. I hadn't seen that
the
yet.
information that I had shared as well.
Yep.
So Representative Dorr, then Representative Lockman, and then Representative Rikerson, and then we will close this meeting. Representative Dorr.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks everyone that's spoken so far for their comments. It's a very difficult time, and I think we're all feeling that. As a legislator, I think we're responsible to take care of the people of Maine. And I understand we're in the midst of a pandemic, and there hasn't been one for 200 years, but nevertheless, we are responsible. The buck stops here. Many Mainers are barely getting by, and they're getting their unemployment. But there are so many, way too many, that have not received any unemployment. Now, I know there's been some displacement of some DOL workers because they were in a sick building. I know that recently there were fraudulent claims filed for some of our Mainers. One happened to be a very close relative of mine. Since the fraudulent claims are uncovered, it seems like everything has stopped. If we were making any progress, it has stopped. But we still have Mainers, many Mainers, that have not received any unemployment since they were able to get unemployment, some as far back as March. These claims have to be addressed. I don't know how we're going to do that, but we need to do it. I'm retired. I will go up and answer phones if I need to. I could read you 4 or 5 people's concerns that have not heard, that keep saying, just keep filing, we'll get that money to you. Well, you know what? That doesn't put food on the table. That doesn't make the car payment. That doesn't make the house payment. These people need to be helped, and we need to do it now. And I could read you several cases that I'm aware of, but I think we've done that. And so with that, I will close. And please, Governor and Commissioner Fortman, please hear us. We want to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Representative Lockman.
Thank you, Senator Bellows. I agree with you, Senator, that it is unconscionable that Commissioner Fortman has not joined us today. Yes, the lack of transparency, as you said, it is unacceptable. But this is what life looks like under a dictatorship. Since constitutional government was suspended in Maine by the unilateral declaration of Governor Mills on March the 15th. This is also what one-party rule looks like. So I hope all of the Democrats on this committee will join with your Republican colleagues in calling for Commissioner Fortman's resignation. I hereby move that the committee call for the resignation of Commissioner Fortman, and I ask for a second.
Representative Lockman, you are out of order.
Really?
Yes. We will take a short recess. I will just remind. You are out of order, Representative Lockman. We will take a short recess, but I will just remind the committee. Governor Paul LePage refused to send Commissioner John Buchanan to this committee. Representative Lockman, you are not
There you
recognized.
go.
And we did not call for that resignation. That is not the issue at hand. The issue is getting help for people who have unemployment needs. So we will take a brief recess while I review the rules, and then there will be a ruling from the chair.
Hey, guys, you want to I knew you were going to shoot us right out of the water. Oh, very tough. I know what you could be doing.